Welcome back to the Big Dharma podcast. Today I'm joined by Dr. Jack Kruse, neurosurgeon, Bitcoiner, educator, and savage. Welcome, Dr. Jack Kruse.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining me today. So I shared a little bit about my background before we started recording, and I shared with you that I'm very fascinated by the connection between human consciousness, light, and health. And I have been seeking as much information as I can over the last 15 years to understand what creates health. And I have this fascination between health and consciousness. What is your definition of consciousness?
Optimization of the interactions between melanin and water to limit mitochondrial DNA mutations.
So I understand what that means because I've been following your work for a long time. To somebody who doesn't know what mitochondria is, how do you think we can explain that to them?
Well, I think the real big issue is that you need to attack a new problem just the way you did in third grade. Go to the library and begin to read. So, for example, before you hit the record button, you said you read the Body Electric. You told me about all these different things that were tied to you. What I'm going to tell you is most people who follow me, this includes Alexis, this includes all the podcasts I do, they think they know more than they know until they know it. When they keep hearing these podcasts come out, you begin to start to see other layers of the onion and connections that you just didn't understand. So, for example, the last podcast that I did a couple of days ago with Marty Bent, when you listen to that podcast and you start to see how all the things in allopathic medicine linked to General Grows and DARPA, and then how DARPA has actually led to targeting of individuals. And then you realize what's going on with COVID, that many people believe it's a bioweapon. It causes mitochondria mutations. And everybody, gets on X and reads about all the aftermarket complications. And then you casually mentioned to me the story about your father in Las Vegas and how he met your mother and how the germline of your mother was programmed by light to actually cause a TBI in your hypothalamus that knocked out TSH and caused Hashimoto's. It's an autoimmune condition. Here's what you probably don't know about your condition. You think you know because you fixed it, but probably not. Light causes a vasopressin release in your hypothalamus. That is the first thing that happens. When vasopressin is released, it starts the whole chain of events that destroys melanin in the place this happens. When you cannot regenerate the melanin in that area, which in your case happened to be in your anterior pituitary, two things occurred. The light, the EMF signal that likely came from the heteroplasmy that was built up in your mom's egg when you were a little girl, any type of light that you're around that was non-native kept releasing vasopressin. What did that do? It caused a TBI in your hypothalamus. And that knocked out that part of your hypothalamus. The interesting part of that story ties directly to the book that you said you read about Becker. What did Becker find in the book that should have stunned you? There was a lot of stunning things, to be fair, but the number one thing that he found that should have really stunned you in your journey, in fact, I don't think it's even stunned Alexis yet enough. But Becker said that bone healing not only worked by a solid state mechanism, but here's the craziest part. The smallest electric current, okay, took a red blood cell and turned it into a pluripotential stem cell that actually regenerates bone. So think about that for a minute. All mammalian regeneration. And just so we're clear, what else did the book say that most of the centralized people don't understand. He started his work in amphibians, frogs, salamanders. But where did he eventually end up before DARPA took him out and the military took him out? He actually was able to regenerate a 3-year-old's fingertip. That's a human. So he spanned 650 million years of evolution with this whole regenerative current business. Now, how he did it in humans with the fingertip was a little bit different than what you read in the body electric. But here's the key part of the story. To regenerate, you have to create a bioelectric current that is 1/trillionth of 1 amp. Let me say that again. 1/trillionth of 1 amp. That's what it took to make a red blood cell turn into a pluripotential cell. So when someone tells me that they really understand my work, they have to prove to me that they've done the heavy lifting to understand really what he found. Then you go to the next step. How does this happen? Now, I'm going to tell you, nobody I've talked to up until today really knows that answer. Now, Uncle Jack does, and I've been throwing it around probably for 2 years. It's actually the main reason that I didn't want to go and do the Huberman podcast. You know why? Andrew Huberman's father is a condensed matter physicist who worked for DARPA. Did you know that?
I heard you say that on the podcast I listened to yesterday for the first time.
Okay. And did you know that what made Huberman famous at Stanford is that he worked with cephalopods? What do cephalopods release when they try to get away from their prey, when they're stressed?
Is it an
Ink.
ink?
Right.
Yeah.
And what is
Yeah.
it made out of? Melanin. So
Melanin, yeah.
before I go on this podcast, you heard Rick say, yeah, I asked Jack for 6 weeks and Jack was recalcitrant to go on. So that right there should stimulate you and everybody else then to tie this back to the Becker story about red blood cells and bone regeneration and where everything comes from, including consciousness. Because it turns out nobody really understands the melanin story. You know why? Melanin, when it's hydrated, decreases electrical conductance. In other words, it takes a DC electric current and turns it into 1/trillionth of 1 amp. So what does that mean, young lady? If you're around anything that increases melanin's bioelectricity, it means it destroys tissue. What's the number one thing that does that? What's the number one thing that destroys hydration around melanin?
Non-native EMF. Yeah.
Got it. The light that was in the casinos for your father. You want to know why his dopamine tracks were taken out in the frontal lobes? What else have I taught you if you were paying attention? The leptin melanocortin pathway stops in 2 places, SCN and the habenular nucleus. What does the habenular nucleus do? It's a relay station for the frontal lobes. That's where the dopamine tracks are. You want to know why your dad had the outcome he did? Now, here's the better thing. Your mom was drawn to your dad during this whole event. Guaranteed she was hanging around blue light, non-native EMF. What does that do to the egg that was in her ovary that eventually we become you? Raise the heteroplasmy rate. What have I taught you about heteroplasmy? Heteroplasmy means that your mitochondria can't make water as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere where this defect happens. And where did you say your defect was? In your hypothalamus.
Well, yeah.
Well, no, not here. That's what I'm saying. This is important because there's going to be a lot of other people listening to this.
Mm-hmm.
You just made a great mistake because you're going to teach people. No, the problem was in your pituitary gland that caused this problem here. But what you don't realize, there's 2 effects. The direct dehydration of melanin causes distal destruction of brain tissue. It causes a TBI. So if you go back and really listen to what I said to Marty really carefully, I told you a story about an endocrinologist that Danny Jones had on his podcast in November of 2022. But Danny, like you, like Alexis, have not connected the dots yet. He actually said that I was diagnosed with Havana syndrome
Oh,
by
I heard that. Yeah.
board certified ENT. They have no earthly idea how I got a DTI MRI that showed damage, but what did he tell you? He was hearing all these voices and doing all this, and he had no idea why he was targeted, but yet he was working on technology for
Mm,
artificial intelligence and biotech companies. Guess where they're affiliated to? DARPA. He wonders why he was targeted. Now, the key thing is, what was the injury? Same injury that you got, but different. Your parents targeted your damage by the things
mm,
that they did to your germline. The government targeted his damage, but the effect is the same. When you remove water made at your mitochondria through the process of metabolism, melanin creates too much electricity, and that electricity burns out anything distal it's connected to in neural pathways. So, guess what that
mm,
means? That means that you need to be either a neurosurgeon or a neurologist to really figure this out. So, when people come and tell me, "Oh, Jack, I've read all your work and this and that," you can see I'm a little bit of a skeptic. Why? Because people don't really get it. Most people don't know that melanin loses its conductance when it's hydrated. Industry, guys like Huberman and his dad, are being paid to actually make melanin more conductive. In other words, they want to use this in the International Space Center for Elon Musk. But what you need to understand, that good utopian idea actually originally came from DARPA, because guess what? DARPA controlled Alan Fry's work and Becker's work at the same time in the late 60s. And what did they realize? If we can stop water production around melanin, we can actually control people. That is the story that I told not only in Rick's podcast, but in Danny's
mm.
podcast with me first. And then I put I guess you would call the whipped cream and cherry on top of it in Marty Bent's podcast. But guess what? Even with those 3 podcasts, did you know exactly how it happens? No. Most people heard the story that Herrera likes to talk, that when sunlight hits melanin, it creates electricity. The interesting
Mhm.
thing, that's not the key part of the story. What type of electricity is the key? See, when you create huge amounts of electricity, guess what happens? You become less conscious.
Mm.
Got it? In other words, you become
Yes.
brain damaged. And then
Yes.
you have to have a signal in you to stimulate the healing. Isn't that what Becker found when bone broke? The piezoelectric current in bone. So guess
Mhm.
what? The stimulating current to start regeneration is in you. The release of vasopressin from any non-native EMF. And do you know why vasopressin is important? You'll be hearing a lot more about this story. This is part of the reason I went to talk to Ray Peat a long time ago. I showed him the absorption and emission spectra of vasopressin. Do you know where it's at? It's in the UV range, right around 380 nanometer light. That's the reason why.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, that's the reason why. When you have light stress, that means non-native EMF stress from any source, it stimulates neuropsin on your skin and in your brain and in your eye and your cornea. That is what starts to hydrate melanin to create the bioelectricity that's 1/1,000,000th of 1 amp to regenerate all your tissue. So for the whole time that you, as a little bitty itty inside your mama and came out the vagina and then lived your life and got Hashimoto's, that whole process, you are not able to create that 1/1,000,000th of 1 amp
Mm.
until you did something. In other words, you tripped over your own feet and said, I think I'm going to reconnect with nature. And here's the funny part. Guess
Mm-hmm.
what turns off vasopressin? Sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
Sunlight. And what
Yeah.
tells us that? The absorption and emission spectra of vasopressin. So when a new person comes to see me and they hear the story that I just told you, do you understand why I cannot tell them this story right off the bat? Do you understand why I have to direct them to all the things you got directed to? Why? Because you need to understand how all these pieces are there and go, wow, this is kind of amazing. But you don't know how the wiring diagram actually works. And until you understand the game that's going on and why someone who figured it out has to be really quiet over 30 to 35 years, because guess what? When you find out that your government figured this out from two guys who worked for the military, but were siloed, kept away from each other so they wouldn't figure it out,
Mm.
could tell that the architects were looking to use this in a way that would not be utopian like Elon Musk would do in the ISS or in SpaceX. In other words, it would be dystopian. Why? Because you could create 360 million obedient idiots to do whatever you want them to do. And what did you describe to me before you first came on? You basically described your dad was able to do that in a Las Vegas casino. Now,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't that scale to exactly the 4.5 hour podcast that I talked to Danny Jones about, how MK Ultra in the 1960s, with the help of Meyer Lansky and Mo Dalitz, used light to actually increase their profits to keep people in these alien environments longer. That is how this whole story began. Then what did DARPA do? They used General Groves' model of siloing, just like they did in the Manhattan Project.
Mm-hmm.
They brought people on. And when they became unuseful idiots, they were
Mm-hmm.
moved. In other words,
Yeah.
we don't need you to do any more, because if you do any more, people like you, Alexis, most of my clients, most of my members, the idiots that follow me on Twitter, they're like, wait a minute, I can see what's going on. Now, let's do a hard stop, because you asked me about consciousness and I love the question. Let's talk about the latest brain injury process going on. That's called a lipid nanoparticle that surrounds a spike protein that
Mm-hmm.
causes mitochondrial DNA mutations. What does it do? It diminishes your ability to make water in a mitochondria. So you probably have heard all the people out there that took, doesn't matter which one they took, but the one thing that there's quite a lot of people out there complaining of their bodies changing and their brains not working. And everybody throws this in a garbage pail term called long COVID.
Yeah.
So I want you to think about what I just told you about your Hashimoto's. How about if I told you that your Hashimoto's was a targeted disease of your hypothalamus? What if I told you that long COVID is every single aquapore 4 gate in their brain is being disrupted by
I believe it.
an LNP that actually is changing the amount of hydration around melanin sheets. And if it continues on long enough, what eventually happens? Your melanin sheets go away. Why? Because you cannot stimulate the regeneration of those sheets inside. So effectively, what have you done? You've disconnected from nature's program of the regeneration that goes back to Becker's book. And then someone has put, I would call it an adapter in to their version of EMF. And now they're running a USB program from the Department of Defense. Starting to make a little bit of sense to you now.
Yeah.
That's what's going on. And when you do this and you are able to know how to tune this neurologic system, you become able to control consciousness. You become
Mm-hmm.
able to control their circadian rhythms. You become able to control every single hormone in their body. Why? Because guess what hormones are? If you look at the absorption and emission spectra, which nobody does, but I do,
Yeah.
they're all controlled by light, and they know how to control them. So when I hear longevity experts, biochemistry experts, food experts come
Yeah.
and tell me that why is it that every single one of my patients has destroyed hormones, which was one of your problems way back
Yeah.
when, and even something that Danny Jones asked me at the end of the podcast, the first one we did, why is everybody's T down? Why is all these young
Mm-hmm.
guys on T? Here's the short answer. Every single one of them are light stressed, and vasopressin is destroying it. That's the reason why your anterior and posterior pituitary are being demolished. You had a very specific issue. It affected TSH. And it turns
Mm-hmm.
out, you may be shocked to hear this because you know that Hashimoto's is an autoimmune
Yeah.
destruction of the TSH cells in your body. Do you know that diseases that are also autoimmune, like MS, do you know that if you antagonize vasopressin in MS patients, that they actually improve? Do you know?
No, I didn't know that.
I know most people don't, but guess what? It actually improves people at Hashimoto's too. This is the reason why sunlight absolutely gets people better with TSH. But you probably know something else about MS. You may not know this about your previous condition. Do you understand now why pregnant women tend to do better when they have MS or Hashimoto's? Do you know why? Because they make huge amounts of water and retain it in their bodies.
Mm.
You think that does? It actually helps re- renovate some of the melanin sheets. Why does nature do this? Oh, it's very simple. Nature's got to build new melanin sheets to make that bioelectric current in that little goober that's in your
Mm-hmm.
uterus. So, guess what? You get the collateral effects of building and regenerating a new person, right? Isn't that tied to Becker's work? Oh, it is.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Pregnancy is just like bone healing. Pregnancy is just like your story of Hashimoto's. But the problem is you haven't scaled the mechanism to truly understand how this is. And this is the reason why when we talk about controversial things tied to this whole thing, is a baby conscious as soon as conception happens? If you look at the mechanism that I'm talking to you about, the answer is probably yes. But do we have any way to physically prove that right now? No. But I do believe, and I've told Alexis this, when we get to the point where we can make photomultipliers and place it inside a cell and we can capture data off it, as soon as I know that vasopressin is active in a fetus, that's technically when consciousness really begins. That's when the baby is conscious of damage to it, to light stress to it, to, I don't know, say an abortionist sticking materials inside the mother's uterus. You know, it's going to open up kind of all kinds of very interesting situations for people. Not that I really focus on that stuff, but I think the story of this wiring diagram is the biggest story in the world right now. And the reason why is the Department of Defense and the Pentagon know exactly how this system operates. And they're using 360 million of us at scale to do it. We are now the target of the CIA, the DOD. And when I say we, I'm talking about the United States. We've done it to lots of other people, and their governments are doing it to lots of their people, because what is the eventual goal? Just remember what our friend Klaus Schwab has told us many times. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy about it. Doesn't that
Yeah.
kind of sound like the situation that your dad was in Las Vegas?
Yes.
Shocking. Don't you think? When I say that to you, if I would have said that to you before we started this podcast, you probably would have been really upset with me. But I just took you through a random walk through Uncle Jack's brain. And now you're beginning to understand shit. These things really are connected. And I would tell you, Klaus Schwab and your dad do have something else in common. Are they conscious enough to understand the things that I just told his little girl on this podcast? But the funny thing is, guess what? He's wide awake and you can talk to him, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't that explain everything that's going on in the world today with people? They're wide awake, but they have absolutely no idea about really what's going on in their surroundings. So what am I trying to tell you? The amount of the DC electric current is what controls your consciousness. If you have too
Mm-hmm.
much of it, too much, guess what happens? You lose consciousness. That's actually what happens when we sleep every night.
Mm. Yeah.
You know that people that have TBIs, kind of like you did, actually do worse when you give them more oxygen? Do you know the reason why the Department of Defense Centralized Medicine and DARPA really like sleep apnea machines? Now you know why. Because
Yeah.
guess what your body's trying to tell you? Your body's trying to tell you when you have light stress, non-native EMF stress, oxygen is a toxin.
Mm.
Shocking, huh? So think about all the
Well,
people that went into COVID in the hospital, and what happened? What did we do? They all got worse when we gave them what? Oxygen.
oxygen.
Wow. Do you understand right now how you didn't really see how all the pieces fit? You knew the bits and pieces, but this is kind of like the Da Vinci Code coming to
Yeah.
you in 3D. Why? Because how you have to make the diagnosis. This is what a good decentralized MD does. Where is the original problem? The
Mm-hmm.
original problem is in your ability to make water adjacent to melanin sheets that dampens that bioelectric current to get it to the exact right place you need to regenerate. Anything that blocks that means that you cannot heal. It also means you won't be able to sleep.
Yeah. What role do you believe fear plays in that ability to make water?
Well, that's pretty simple. Any stress. I've said this to Alexis multiple times. And I will be very frank with you on this. This is one of the questions I absolutely hate, because I say it so many times, but I don't think people understand what I'm really saying. All stress, doesn't matter what it is, in the body focuses on one thing, the paraventricular nucleus. Do you want to know why Hashimoto's is linked here? This is where melanin and vasopressin crash at the paraventricular nucleus. This is where the antibodies come from. What does the PVN do? Turns on the parasympathetic nervous system at the hypothalamic level. That's actually the key. So guess what? Every stress, what is POMC, the gene, all about? It makes all these freaking chemicals that guarantee we reduce our stress. What is the
It would
POMC?
feel good. Yeah.
You got it. What is the POMC gene really about? If you really paid attention to what I said to Huberman and Rick, after I figured out that Huberman really was a moron, and
Mm-hmm.
that he wasn't smart enough to be in DARPA, neither was his dad, I began to realize that he did not understand that the POMC gene in mammals is tied to the KT event, which was a light stress event. Let me just tell you something. The stuff you told me before you hit the record button, that's a stressful thing for you. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
any trauma that you had because of that as a child, what do you think it did to you? It actually made your Hashimoto's worse.
Yes.
Got it? So when someone has a traumatic childhood, someone has something happen to them in their life, like say they're bullied, this will happen. You start to think about what I just said and go, is DARPA using this with school shooters? Of course they are. There's no question. Now, if you really want to go to the nth level, some of us know about the story about John Podesta's emails and Hillary Clinton's Frazzlegate. Do you understand why
Hmm.
now? There's a link between people and government that use these stress responses, because you want to know something? These are the people that know about these programs. Do you understand what I'm saying? And
Yes.
they're able to see the direct effects of these programs in an acute setting, so they know what the effect will be globally. Do you know why politicians don't give two fucks about telling you the truth? Because they know when these programs are enacted, you can't decipher what the truth is. That's actually really what was going on in Las Vegas casino with your dad. He had no
Hmm.
earthly idea he was destroying his life by sitting in that environment, because it was actively causing him slow onset brain damage. So let's
Well,
do
he went
another
crazy.
let's
He
do
went
another
crazy.
no, let's do another hard stop. Let's talk about why he went crazy. Because of that connection of the central retinal pathways to the SCN and hybridinal nucleus, what did it do to everything in your frontal lobes? So let's take this to the nth degree. Let's speed the whole process up. Let's say the Pentagon was sitting in the casino your dad was in. You understand now why people are getting Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, and frontal temporal dysplasia? Because that TBI affects those parts of the brain. So guess what? If you raise the energy or the intensity of the weapon, what does it do? It dehydrates mitochondrial DNA, which does what? Dehydrates melanin. Melanin makes
Mhm.
more electric signal. What does that do distally to anything it's connected? Destroys it. So when I get an MRI and I look at it and I say, wow, look at this. The frontal central gyrus is, 50% collapsed. And then your mom is next to me saying, yeah, my husband has changed. He's not the same person. His personality has changed. His ability to navigate his environment has changed. You start to go, this sounds crazy, until you walk into a decentralized clinician that goes, think I might have made sense of the things that Alan Fry and Robert Becker found. What did I do? What did I do to reverse engineer this? I took all the programs that was in DARPA, took all the programs that was in SRI, took all the programs in the Brain Health Initiative, and I put them all together. And I started to
Hmm.
realize what the problem was. I even said to Marty Bent, people asked me when I left Nashville, why did I have a pit stop in Hattiesburg, Mississippi? Do you know why? Because that's where Camp Shelby is. Do you know what Camp Shelby is? That's where they
No.
send new soldiers before they go to the theater and send them to war, which is kind of like the stress that we just talked about, right? And then they come back. And when they come back, I get to see them again. And I got to do that for 3 years. That's the real reason that I went to this area. Why? Because when I started to put all this together in 2013, I couldn't even believe it. So I needed to
Hmm.
see people who are affected by this at higher intensities. Okay. I
Mm.
wanted to see, did they have brain damage in parts of this program, so that I could order MRIs on them. And guess what I found? They did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So your problem and your dad's problem were lower intensity TBIs. Yours was focal, your dad's was global in all of his frontal lobes and his orbital frontal gyrus. But see, how did I know that? Remember, my day job is a neurosurgeon.
Of
So
course.
when you understand this mechanism from all those things that you asked me about, Jack, what is a person to do when you start? You need to go to the library and learn about all these parts. And then the best way to do it is probably be a member And then I'll sit you down and explain to you how all these parts fit together. And then I'll prove it to you because guess what I'll do? I'll order a test on you that show it to you, just like I did to the people in Camp Shelby. And guess what? Was I able to fix people that were damaged to unbelievable extents from stress in war? So do you think I can't take care of a little girl at Hashimoto's like you are? Oh, I did. I mean, yeah, I can. You know what
Yeah.
the problem
Yeah.
is? Can I get you to change your ability or your life in doing the things you were doing? So when you hear me say, and maybe you're probably the best person to understand this more than anyone else I've talked to, because I tell my members this all the time. If there's someone in your family or someone you love that's sucking the fucking energy out of you, you need to turn the switch off. Why?
Yeah.
Because if you don't, they're going to cause brain damage in you. And when you hear that without understanding the context that I just gave you in the beginning of this podcast, it sounds crazy until I
Well, I
prove
had to do that. I did that.
you didn't tell
I
me
had
that.
no choice. I had no choice. Yeah, I had to cut my whole family off at one point.
Well, that's the whole point that I try to explain to people. I will tell you, it's the number one biggest problem. Actually, she's waving her hands back there. It's the number one problem with my nurse. It's also the number one problem that I deal with my members. Why? Because they physically don't string together the lessons that I give them. And this is extremely frustrating. And it turns out
Yeah.
that my life has gotten substantially easier through COVID. Why? Because everybody has had the most stressful event
Mm.
globally. Like we've all, as 8 billion people, with the exception of the people I just met in the Amazon rainforest, went through this
Yeah.
and they didn't. And
Mm.
it was amazing to me because the fact that everybody went through this, now people are willing to do what you asked me in the beginning. Jack, how do we give people awareness? Well, the way you get awareness is you have to focus them in on the problem, which is light, water, and magnetism. So if you don't know shit about light, water, and magnetism and how this all fits, so what have I decided to do with this story over 20 years? I've actually decided to put it in a quilt document. I've actually written blogs about each little part. I do podcasts. Why? Because I can tell stories and weave this all together for you until you have done enough to hydrate your melanin sheets to make 1/1,000,000th of 1 ampere of the current in your brain to regenerate the TBI that you caused yourself from the choices. In your case,
Yes.
you didn't choose it because you had a transgenerational epigenetic effect because of your mother and father. But I
But I
bet,
did though. But I did though, because I chose life decisions that were part of what we would call the matrix. And I was working in a corporate job in an office under awful lights that continued to make me worse for a very long time. So I did make those choices that made it worse.
well, what the point I was trying to make to you is if you were my patient, I wouldn't beat you up like I beat other people up. Why? Because that's the reason why, like when you start an optimal journal on my website, what's the first thing that I want to know about? I want to know about your mother and I want to know about your grandmother. Why? What am I trying to assess? What was the heteroplasmy rate of the egg that you came from? Why? Because it tells me about your hydration status and your melanin sheets. Then I can tell the next thing. I'll just make you take all your clothes off and go in the room with Chantel, and she'll come out and tell me about your melanation on the outside, and then your neurologic exam that I do on you tells me about your melanation on the inside. And then if I have any questions, what do? I actually use MRIs to figure out where have you lost the regenerative current inside your body. And then what do? Then we give you very specific and targeted precision answers about how to fix that problem. Now, many people don't listen. I'm talking about people that have spent me lots of money. And you know what I do? I fire them.
Mm-hmm.
And people look at me like I'm crazy when I do that. I'm like, look, you're wasting my time. There's other people out there that are interested in taking back control of their life.
Mm-hmm.
They're not a slave to their wants, needs, or desires, or they think this is crazy. And you know, the real reason that most people fall off the trolley tracks is because of the first question you asked me. They never put in the proof of work to learn how light, water, and magnetism really operates in us.
Yeah.
And I think the more people who listen to the podcast and then start to correlate this with the blogs, let me tell you something. I
Mm-hmm.
can almost tell you who's going to get better by the questions they ask me. Why? This is one of the reasons, I guess, about 5 or 6 years ago on my website where I have my members, I used to do a webinar, which was like a video that they would stand in front of and I teach them about more science. And I got the clue from my members that I was dumbing them down further by doing that. And I said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to change immediately. And I never told anybody why I did it. I said, I'm going to start having them do Q&As with me. And then I told them to put optimal journals out there. And I can tell from the optimal journal and the questions they're asking me exactly really what the problem is. And I can tell you just how compliant or non-compliant they're going to be. And you know this
Mm-hmm.
because you probably dealt with this with your dad. There are certain people, like when the system is really bad, they're not going to comply no matter what. They're going to continue
Yeah.
to do what they do. And that's why I tell people evolution has taught me not everybody's fixable. Why? That's why we have extinction events. That's the reason why great
Mm-hmm.
white sharks eat baby seals. It's the reason why lions eat, wildebeest. And it's not a problem. Only humans think it's a problem because of the way we're socialized to think. And that actually comes from our education, which ironically is tied to the government yet again.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's the same process at scale, but nobody seems to see it the way I do. And to be honest with you, this is where I guess I invoked my arrogance, ignorance, and my Satoshi Nakamoto quotes. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't get it by now, I don't have time to waste on you because it's the truth. And, I know a lot of people who watched the Marty Bent podcast said, why is it that Jack only really wants to focus on people who get Bitcoin? Well, it's pretty simple. If you're smart enough to understand Bitcoin, you are going to put the proof of work in to answer the first question you asked me on this podcast. Because guess what? There are people out there that I can't fix. And I will tell you, there's way more people now that are like your dad who complied with government mandates. And I hate to tell
Mm-hmm.
you that some of those people, they're not fixed. This is the reason why the fights on Twitter, you don't see me getting involved in. I just usually block those people. Why? Once I've
Yeah.
assessed that you're part of the problem and not part of the solution, does it make any sense like for you to send your dad to me to do a consult? No. You know that.
Mm-hmm.
But you'd be surprised how many people want to consult with me. I tell them what to do, never hear from them again.
Mm. I'm not really surprised. I
Well,
mean,
I can
it's
tell you,
it's it's
surprises
there.
surprises my nurse. She just spent 30, she spent almost a half a day with 30 of my members yesterday at the beach. And when she came home and told me the things she told me, I was thinking about a lot of things. And it made me realize where I am in this 2-year journey after letting this cat out the bag and putting the target back on me, that I still think the people that are interested in decentralized medicine and decentralized money still don't really understand the lesson that I'm really delivering to you. And your first question today was a good one. And I think the way in which you started this before you hit the record button actually set the tone for me. Why? Dunning-Kruger effect. You thought you knew,
Mhm.
but guess what? I didn't get the whole story. And what do I always teach my members? Just like I'm trying to teach you. Some people will listen to this and think, God, he's such an asshole. No, wounds create our wisdom. You actually
Yeah.
learned from your mom and dad. So why can't you learn it also from a podcast so that down the road you go, I didn't realize how these things connected and how they intercalate. So maybe I'll be able to understand how different diseases, unlike Hashimoto's, really happens. Because maybe the way I thought it happens really isn't that way, because that's what centralized allopathic and functional medicine do. They
Yeah.
all full of shit. And my goal before I'm done is to show everybody definitively why they're full of shit. Why? Because I believe people that were smart enough to make the decision to own decentralized money, those are the people that need to understand how decentralized health really operates so that we can mitigate brain damage, so that we can optimize water production and regenerate our melanin at every level. Because if you don't do that, um, you will be subject to the sausage grinder that is centralized medicine, the sausage grinder that is DARPA, the sausage grinder that is our politics, the sausage grinder that is
Hmm.
our education system. And I hate to say this, the sausage grinder that is our friends and family.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if they're all plugged into that matrix of control and we're around them, it's going to be difficult for us to reclaim our own sovereignty. And that was a really difficult thing for me to do. But there was this inflection point that I realized that if I want to be in my full sovereignty, I have to unplug from everything that isn't that.
I think that's what makes me happy to talk to you. Why? Because you were smart enough to realize that. And that tells me that you have the ability to regenerate. You have the ability to become a savage. You have the ability to teach these lessons to other people. Because honestly, that's really what I'm looking to do. I'm looking to take the wisdom that I learned from Mother Nature and install it by USB into
Mm,
every brain that is capable of understanding it. Like I can tell you, but I can't understand it for you. But
yeah.
I can help you understand if you listen to what I'm telling you and stop tripping over your own feet. That's the key.
I've been doing everything I can to understand it and embody it and also teach it because I believe that's the only way. I mean, the other alternative to that is to just like what you described is to remain a slave to that system. And to me, that's not a life. That's being walking around half dead, which
Well,
that wasn't an
tell
option
you,
for me.
I would tell you, not to get all philosophical, but I think we need to use current events. Think about what happened on November 5th. 50% of
Mm,
the population was brain dead. 50% said, okay, let's give crazy a try again.
yeah.
We gave crazy a try again. And guess what we're seeing right now in March? Same old, same old. Like, oh, yeah, we're going to change Fruit Loops and we're going to change red dyes, but we're not going to change the big elephant in the room. And I want everybody to understand something very clearly that you heard me say to Marty, and I'm going to recapitulate it to you in a different way. Understand that politics is just like a wingnut. Left and right is exactly the same. They're using the same programs because these people know about the program. They
Yeah.
can't release the Epstein story to you because if they did, they'd be deathly afraid that you'd start to figure out exactly what I'm trying to explain to you here. And it just
Hmm.
mind boggles me that people would rather get on Twitter and talk about what an idiot Pam Bondi is and Kash Patel
Yeah.
and Donald Trump, screwed us. And I'm like, Y'all actually thought you were going to get the secret sauce. No, the secret sauce is out there and it's discoverable. But I want you to understand the way in which you need to do it isn't the way you thought. It isn't the way Ian Carroll or Whitney Webb or Mark Godwin are going to tell you. It's going to be the way I'm delivering it to you. Why? You need to have the biologic story down pat so that you can understand how the economic and political story is being used to turn you into a cow and put you in a pen. That's exactly what's really operational now. And I know it's really hard for people to swallow, but I'm going to tell you, just as I tried to use your dad's example and your example as an altered state of consciousness, you know that you've heard probably through the last 6 months that we have this thing called Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, that is actually a real thing that's used to control different people. It's used to control Kamala's people differently than it is to use Trump's. But what does it do? It creates blind faith in those that follow into the pen. So those that have followed into the pen, which are the MAGA people, you may now begin to understand why Uncle Jack did the second podcast with Danny Jones and Callie Meads. What am I trying to do? All the things that I said in that second podcast with Mary and Callie is I wanted to show the world where Callie came from. He came from 3 DARPA linked places. He told the world, I'm not interested in working with Bobby Kennedy, yet he is now. How did Uncle Jack know that, Cheryl? How did he know? How was I preconditioned to know something that I couldn't possibly know? I'm going to tell you the reason why. Because I understand how this system operates in humans, this regeneration system. And how can I tell you that, Callie kept beating around the bush. He's like, Jack, what are you saying? I didn't want to say it. Callie is a targeted individual by DARPA. And there's a reason he was placed where he's placed, so that Bobby actually becomes impotent for Maha to fix the things that need to be fixed. And have we saw that? Don't you think it's kind of remarkable that as soon as Bobby gets confirmed, we have an outbreak of measles, right? In Texas. You heard what Bobby said, but let's do a hard stop. Didn't we hear Bobby when he was with Nicole, whose child was perfectly normal and got the MMR jab, same jab Bobby just talked about? It's almost like nothing that happened with Bobby and Nicole really mattered. And nobody in MAGA or the DOD or DARPA really could give 2 fucks what any of you think about it. Why? Because they already got you.
Yeah.
I tried to warn you, didn't I? Before January 20th. But some people the podcast resonated with, and some people it didn't. And what did people say to me, Cheryl? Go and look at the podcast comments. I'm an asshole. I'm ignorant because you're talking about my guy, DJT. Well, here we are 3 months later. How's it turned out? Was I an asshole, or was I a better diagnostician than your brain damaged ass? That's got problems in your frontal lobe. You're being controlled and don't even know you're controlled. When you heard me say to Marty, and I would say this to Danny if we did a podcast, Danny in the podcast that he did with Len Bear and Duncan asked Duncan how many people he thought was targeted. He said 10,000. Do you know what my answer was to Marty Ben? How about 360 million?
Yeah.
I don't care what side you're on. You are subject to this program. Do you know why? Because of what I said to Rick and Huberman. This program absolutely links to how mammals are optimized. The leptin-melanocortin pathway was optimized by nature through the KT event. And you need to now understand how that event scales to the use of technology today, because every single chronic disease epidemic is happening because of the process that I told you in this podcast. None of it is tied to what you think. And when you don't understand what I'm saying, you look at me like I'm crazy. And eventually I'm going to prove to everybody that I'm not the crazy one, that you were, because you bought the propaganda hook, line, and sinker. That's really what's going on here. And when you understand how ubiquitous the effect is of light to cause light stress, that it can be targeted in any place in your body to cause a problem, then you begin to see, okay, now I know why Hashimoto's now is the most common hypothyroid event. When I used to tell people this in the old podcast, my Robbins pathology book, which I think I have here. Yeah, right up there. It's the orange book. You see it, Chantal? It's on the top shelf. In that book, there's a paragraph this big that says Hashimoto's is one of the rarest forms. That book was written in the 1980s. So from the 1980s to now, it's completely flipped. Well, what happened in the 1980s? That's when DARPA started to use their program at scale. That's when they started spitting out. See the orange book right there? No, I don't want it. I'm just telling you. You know, it's just funny we're talking about it. It's sitting right there. But that answer was in the book. Those are the things that happened in my life that allowed me to figure out how this process happens. And to fully answer your question, can you be conscious, but not as conscious as you really need to be when you're wide awake? Yeah, that's kind of what MK Ultra is really all about. It's what the Stanford Research Institute was all about. It's exactly what the Brain Health Initiative is mastering. It's how we got crazy people like Ted Kaczynski and how we got the Mansons and his tribe. It's how we got the wackos at Waco. It's how we got, the people that thought it was a good idea to kill themselves, because of some comment they thought was going to come wipe us out. These things, the way I see them, are not the way you see them. Why? Even though you knew all the bits and pieces and parts, you got to understand how it connects. And if you don't understand that last little bit of how you make 1/1,000,000th of 1 ampere and you do it constantly, then guess what? You never get to the point of how to create a savage from a zombie.
Yeah, I think that the reason why I asked you about fear is it's just one way that there's this warfare against humanity, right? It's one of the weapons used, right? But I think there's so many.
But it's about control. That's what it is. I mean, people like to use the harsh language. I don't shy away from it either, but you got to call it out for what it is. These things are all tools to control us. That's why I said COVID was a compliance test for an economic reset. I'm still holding true to that. That's the reason why I'm out here in Bitcoin circles. I'm out here in decentralized medicine circles trying to get the food gurus and biochemists to understand where I'm going. I promise you, I'd say the next 2 months, when people hear about the details of how I tried a long time ago to get a guy like Ray Pete understand this perspective, I am going to lay it out piece by piece. People today right now think I'm an asshole about the things I say about them now, but when you find out exactly what went down, then I think I'm going to be okay with people judging me then. When I mentioned in podcast that Charles Poliquin was my friend, and then I told him he was going to die and likely die of heart disease. Why? Because him and his friends were screwing around with things like Melatonin. Think about what I told you about melanin. Can you imagine using a drug that stimulates melanin that's not hydrated in your body? What that means?
I can't, no, because I think that's insane, but
But guess
okay.
what? Now you know really how insane it is
Yeah.
because of the last missing piece that you didn't put together. And when you hear that and you go, so is this why a person who could look like Adonis and Michelangelo statue could die at 58 years old from, heart disease? Yeah. Why?
Yeah.
You can't regenerate because the
Mhm.
bioelectric current is like trillions of amps instead of one
Yeah.
trillionth of 1 amp. That's the whole point. And the thing is, when people look at their supplements from their favorite
Hmm.
morons that sell them
Hmm.
and they
Hmm.
hear this podcast, you start to go, so this is why Uncle Jack is really, really down on these supplements because they all affect water chemistry. And if it affects water chemistry, we're affecting our 1 trillionth of 1 ampere current. So we can't regenerate. And actually, we're making our problem worse. Or if we have sleep apnea, the CPAP machine actually could make us worse. Or, oh, let's go to the functional medicine guys because they think HBO is a really good thing because they make $2,000 or $3,000 off each treatment. And it turns out when you add more oxygen to the system, you actually destroy more melanin.
Yeah.
Stop.
It's insane.
I'm
Yeah.
mad.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But
Yeah. I
not
mean,
everyone's
I
going to
figured out,
understand.
but I figured I got really angry, and I resonate when you talk about, how angry you are about time so much personally, because as a young girl, I was already sick, I believe, even before the Hashimoto's diagnosis, which I got when I was 25. But as a young girl, I was sick, I had issues, and I was put on birth control. And it wasn't until later in life when I was fighting for my health and going on this healing journey that I decided, okay, none of this is working for me. And I wanted to reject any of the things that they were giving me because I had no confidence in them, including birth control, that I had what I call a spiritual awakening. And I like woke up for the first time, right? Things started to work more. I was going outside more, and I could see clearly that that time was stolen from me, and I could never get those years back. And ever since
You
then,
may not be able to get the time back, but I will tell you that once you are conscious of truly what's going on around you, that means you can optimize the time that you actually do have left. I think the worst thing in the world right now, at least that I see, I'm seeing it right now. I saw it with Trump's speech and I saw it with people in MAGA. They're furious right now that no one's been arrested. Pam, Kosh haven't arrested anybody. They
yeah,
voted, 77 million people voted for change. And what are they getting? The same as the other thing. They're getting the rhetoric, however, that the people that are in power are okay giving you. In other words, it's kind of like that's probably a bad analogy. It's like having sex and just putting the tip in. It's just not good enough.
yeah,
Uh, you need you need to realize that when you're fully conscious and you truly know what's going on, this is when you go all in. And that's
hmm,
that's really the case. And I don't know how to understand it for the audience members. All I can do is teach you what the science of nature has taught me about this process and how it works in the human brain.
yeah. Well, I'm all in, and I have been working in every possible way to elevate my consciousness and optimize the time that I do have here for about the last 15 years. And your teachings have been a big part of that. And one of my objectives is to just continue to spread that word. And I'm doing that with Alexis too. And I recognize what you're saying is that some people will never wake up. And I never really thought about my condition being a TBI, but when you say that, it makes so much sense to me because I couldn't think at that time. I had cognitive impairment, and it was really difficult I had to dig deep for the will to fight for my life essentially and to fight for my health and my well-being.
People
And
don't
it's,
understand. People don't understand that the leptin melanocortin pathway, the real basics, So when you understand that those first order neurons go to the SCN and they go to the habendial nucleus, that is the reason you can't think, because anything distal to those tracks, and in your case, what's distal to the SCN track? Your hypothalamus. That's where your thyroid problem is. What's distal to the habendial nucleus? Your frontal lobes. That's how you think. That's your
Yeah.
new real estate that turned you to human from chimp. So what you just said totally makes sense. But here's the problem. When you're in your own body and you don't understand really what's happening to you, you get lost. It's like being a pair of underwear in a dryer. You just keep
Yeah.
going around and around. And then what do? You, as the tumbling underwear, ask the functional medicine doctor or the supplement seller or
Right.
the red light manufacturer or the allopathic doctor. And what do you get? They give you a solution that's good for them and not good for you. Why? Because they profit from it. What you need to realize, what you profit from
Yeah.
is actually nature. And as Einstein once told us, the answers are usually simple. The problem is, can you fathom that it's true? And I have to tell you, I think I've done a spectacular job of leading people, putting my finger in their nostrils and say, read what Becker really found in bone regeneration. He found that the
Yeah.
smallest ever electric current regenerates bone, doesn't leave a scar. So any
Hmm.
disease you come to me with, but magically, you know what happens? They're like, oh, well, that's just bone. I'm like, okay, how about at the end of his career, he was actually able to regenerate fingertips in a 3-year-old who cut him off. And not only was it the tissue, it was the bone and the sensation. Everything came back.
Incredible. It's
So
incredible.
you start to go, I just had one of my members ask me this question, this Q&A. I probably get in trouble for saying this, but this is what really frustrates me. Hey, Jack, I've got periodontal disease and they think I need to have, periodontal grafts and this and that. What should I do? And my answer was, how about you read the fucking blogs? Because how do you regenerate your periodontal tissue? The same way Becker did. But
Hmm.
they don't get
Hmm.
it. It's reconnecting with nature. And it is that simple. It's the
Okay.
reason I'm here where I am, out of, how shall I say, the theater that is built in the United States to control you. There's not towers all the way around me. Okay. I don't have satellites. Oh, I do have satellites above me, but thankfully I have a roof with grass on it that keeps Elon Musk at bay and keeps DARPA at bay. So I guess what I'm trying to explain to people, to become more fully conscious, you need to understand what the key points are in the lessons that someone delivers to you. And no, don't get lost in the fluff. But I'm telling you, that number one thing that Becker found is huge. Just like I told Andrew, the number one thing he needed to focus in on was Roland Van Wyck's onion root experiment, to find out that every single cell releases ultra weak UV light. Well, ask yourself why. Well, it turns out that's what turns POMC on. That's how you
Hmm.
regenerate your melanin sheets. What makes the water? Sunlight outside. That's the reason why beta endorphin is part of POMC. Nature told me the freaking answer 25 years ago. You are addicted to be in sunlight. We make opiates when we're in the
Hmm.
sun. Like, I don't know how big a telegraph that should be
I
to
know.
everybody, but guess what? I've been saying it and people still look at me like I'm crazy. And every time they put those Apple things in their ears or they're
Right.
watching a virtual reality thing, they have no idea that they just destroyed every single peptide that comes out of POMC. In other words, it's almost like they're Plato's allegory of the cave, where
I was going to bring that up.
they say to DARPA, here, go put the handcuffs on me. I'm cool with this. I don't want to go outside and run in nature. Just let me stay in the cave with the rest of the people in MAGA and Kamala Harris's voters.
Well,
That's
I
not
was
my
going to
job.
bring that up. I was going to ask you your thoughts on this because the allegory of the cave was 2,500 years ago, and they didn't have the non-native EMF
Yes, they did.
bioweapons then. They
No,
did?
they didn't have the bioweapons, but they had non-native EMF. You don't
Because if I
realize
look at it, I
we had
don't know that.
cataracts, we had cataracts back then. I mean, what's the number one non-native EMF? I brought it up in the Huberman podcast. When Neanderthals went inside, what did they use?
Mm,
Artificial light at night. It was fire. That's the first artificial light.
mm,
Let's scale it to, let's go back to 65 million years. What's the real first non-native EMF? Anytime there's clouds, do you know what happens? More cosmic radiation gets to terrestrial Earth. So what does that mean?
mm.
That's not terrestrial. It's designed not to be here. But guess what? There are things that happen in the atmosphere that change that. You want to hear, again, don't think you know this because you probably didn't dissect what I wrote. In the ubiquination series, I try to explain to people how the solar wind changes nitrogen in the sky. How many times have you seen the picture that I show people about chlorophyll and hemoglobin, and it's surrounded by a nitride cage? Do you know what the key to some of these DARPA programs is? They actually control the flow of nitrogen in your mitochondria. What are they doing? They're controlling the bioelectric potential by doing that in you. And you know where they got that lesson from? From geoengineering the sky. How do you like that? And guess what?
So
That
far.
was the whole focus of the ubiquination series, which is, it predates Patreon. In other words, you can go read those blogs right now for free. And the
Hmm.
reason I put them out there for free, to be honest with you, I didn't think people would be able to read one of those blogs and really understand where I was going. But if you go look at the pictures, oh, the pictures are there, girlfriend. It keeps showing you chlorophyll and it keeps showing you hemoglobin over and over and over again. What am I trying to get you to understand? Okay, in 2023, I sit down with Rick and Huberman. What do I tell you? KT event happens. We get chlorophyll first. We get hemoglobin second. 65 million years ago, an asteroid comes, and all of a sudden, melanin becomes the most important semiconductor. I just gave you 3 semiconductors. And what's the goal of all 3 of them? To decrease the DC electric current made from sunlight. That's what all 3 of them have in common. And it turns out melanin does it better than chlorophyll and does it better than hemoglobin. That's your answer. Staring you right in the face. It's like
So that's how
I can put the
control the
posters all over the classroom, but girlfriend, if you can't read and you're dumbed
yeah,
down from blue light,
yeah,
got it?
yeah.
That's
But that's
why
how the few control the many. And that's how it was even with Socrates and Plato.
you got it. And guess what? That story has been there. Isn't that story recapitulated in some of the other stories I told you? Let's talk about King Tut
Yeah.
and the Anubians.
Hmm.
The Anubians who built the pyramids, their bones are buried right on the side of the Sphinx. Peter Unger digs them up and finds out their skeletons are perfect. And we know that these people were as dark as the people from Nairobi, Kenya. Why? Because they lived in equatorial places outside night and day. And how do we know that the elite weren't? Because they put their fucking mummies in sarcophagus and we found them and we did CT scans on them and found out they have the same fucking diseases that we have today. So don't
Yeah,
tell me non-native EMF hadn't been around for 5,000-6,000 years,
I see.
because it has. You just don't realize it. And if you
Hmm.
want me to scale it from now 5,000 years in advance, look at Mark and Scott Kelly. 2 identical twins. One went up in space for 340 days. One came back with unbelievable epigenetic changes and methylation problems. And all issues tied to the same story that I'm showing you today. The poor guys that have been stuck up in the Space Center because of Biden, same problem. When they come back, wait till you see what they are. In other words, this story is so discoverable, but here's the problem. It goes back to the first question you asked me in the podcast. Did you go to the library and learn the basics? You think you did, but did you? I don't think so. But guess what? Can I keep throwing the proof? How many times have you heard me say, I got the receipts?
Hmm. All
But
the time.
are you putting the story together? Like you can read the book, but did you understand what you just read or heard?
Hmm.
That's the problem.
Working on it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, doing my best.
That's the problem. People think they learn my stuff and they can go out and get their own tribe of people and magically, everything's going to change. That's why I don't fight them. I'm like, go ahead. You know why? They don't understand how the system works.
I read in Becker's book something else that I found really interesting that has been something that I intuitively felt on my whole healing journey, which is that there's a purpose, a biological and evolutionary purpose to pain. And that the pain is the signal to help us stay away from danger and to evolve and to wake up and pay attention. And what I think is part of the problem, and I'd love your perspective on this, is people think that they can just escape the pain or numb the pain or get a jab to prevent the pain or take a pharmaceutical to cover up the pain. And they're not looking at it from the perspective of what Becker talked about. And what I have felt is that the purpose of pain is the cessation of pain, is to actually
Oh,
figure out the problem.
the purpose of pain is what I told you already. See, this is good that this is happening to you right here because you're not stringing the lesson that I gave to you in this podcast. What does pain do? It's a stress, right? Physiologic stress releases vasopressin. How did we learn about this from the Camp Shelby guys that I took care of? All of them, vasopressin levels was shot. So guess what happens? Vasopressin stimulates mitochondria to make water. Water hydrates melanin to create the 1 trillion to 1 amp to regenerate. What happens if that process is interrupted? Like, say, if you do things to dull the pain, do you get the stimulus for healing, regeneration? The answer is no. This
No.
is the reason why. How many times, Cheryl, have you heard me say, wounds create your wisdom? Do you understand
Yeah.
how incredibly important what I just said to you in that small little thing is? I just gave you the answer to really what Becker found, and you don't even realize it. Like, you can run away from the trauma. In fact, what do I tell people? Embrace the suck.
The suck. Yeah.
Plus, the suck will bring you to the light. That is the key. And the light is the key to this process. But you have to remember,
Yeah.
it's not the light in the sense that you think. The system is optimized to dampen light signals to the smallest DC electric currents that you can imagine to change the bioelectric signatures in cells in order to regenerate. And is this story one of the coolest stories for me as a doctor to have discovered? Yes. But it took me a long time to figure it out. I spun my wheels for 20 years before I woke up. So do I understand and do I have some sympathy for what my patients who come to me go through? Yes. But there comes a point, like, I didn't have anybody that I could sit down that was like me. And
Me neither.
I firmly believe that if I could have met me now, then I would have changed I would have probably changed in the 1980s and 1990s. Why? Because I had enough things happen to me in my life then that I think I would have put this together. But that's not how life unfolds. Life unfolds the way it does for a reason. And I really believe that COVID was a huge advantage for me. Why? Because I think so many people are sick and tired of being sick and tired that now they're willing to go back and do the heavy lifting, what we like to call in Bitcoin, the proof of work, and get skin in their own game to understand that skin in your own game, wounds create your wisdom, embrace the suck is the story about how sunlight, melanin, and water regenerate every single disease that you could imagine. It is that simple. And in order for you to get that place, I have to put you in that environment where you can experience it for yourself. And then when you see it, I usually don't have to talk to you too much.
Right. It works.
That's
It's
it.
amazing. That's why I'm here at the 23rd latitude in Florida, because it's my priority also. I wouldn't be anywhere else. Yeah. But I love, thank you for explaining about pharmaceuticals and pain. I just think that it's such a fucking cop out when people want to just mask the pain and not face it. and
Let me
not
tell
ask
you,
questions about it.
let me tell you, I'll even direct you right to where the answer is, and you can watch. This will show you how good my memory is. You know that I'm a surgeon, my day job. So these guys
Mhm.
that came back from Camp Shelby is very interesting. The guys that had the worst PTSD, the worst damage, weren't the people that were missing legs and arms. Turned out the people that had horrible injuries actually didn't get PTSD. Do you know why? They had massive releases of vasopressin. What did the
Mm.
vasopressin do? The vasopressin stimulated the regeneration programs in them almost immediately. Now, to someone like you,
Interesting.
that probably sounds so counterintuitive, but based on what I told you in the first hour and a half of this podcast, you're like, oh fuck,
Makes sense. Yeah.
there's the perfect analogy of why pain really matters. I want you to think about now childbirth differently. The pain of childbirth actually is the stimulus for the woman to make even more vasopressin so that she can heal her own body. And what
Hmm.
we do in medicine, we put a fucking needle in the lady's back
Yeah.
so she
Epidural.
can't feel
Yeah.
anything.
It's
You
insane.
realize what you just did? You understand? And the thing is,
Yes.
when you say this to people who don't understand my perspective, it looks like I'm crazy. And then when you understand my perspective, you start to go, Jesus Christ, is there anything that we do in the modern world that doesn't fuck this thing up?
Probably not. It's pretty bad. We've come so far away from nature. But that's the insanity that I don't understand, because it was very obvious to me. And I'm just a girl trying to live her life, right? It was very obvious to me after, I don't know, maybe let's say 2 years of going to endocrinologists, that the outcomes weren't good.
Well, that's
And I was like,
Einstein. That's
yeah,
Einstein's
exactly.
acronym.
Yeah, I keep doing the same thing, expect a different result. That's insanity. And so, I thought to myself, okay, I need to ask other questions. I can't trust this source. The outcome isn't good. And so that's why it's, sometimes mind-boggling to me that people just comply, because,
No,
it's like, well, where's that gotten you?
it makes total sense because it's the story of your dad in the casino.
Yeah,
Actually, that's
right.
what I'm trying to tell you. The wisdom that was created from the pain that you had as a child, realize that should always sharpen your blade. Don't forget it. Like that's why I don't run away from any bad mojo. Why? It always keeps me really, really sharp. And I think when people truly listen to what I'm saying here, they'll begin to understand why I'm so saucy on Twitter, why I'm so saucy on podcasts. Why? Because I believe that you have doled the pain in your life too much and you need to be squarely punched right in the mouth to realize what you don't know. And when
Yeah.
you realize what you don't know, that is the stimulus, vasopressin, to get your brain to wake you the fuck up and make you more conscious to just how bad and inferior the environment that you've built your life in is. That's the truth.
That's the Carl Jung quote, right? There's no coming to consciousness without pain. And that's been the theme of
But it's
my
a great
life.
thing that he can say, but he could never explain why. I'm telling you, has to do with the vasopressin signal. And like I said, in the next 2 months, these blogs that I'm getting ready to come out, these are the culmination of all the work that I've put in. But I've been
Mm.
telling people this story 20 years. It's been very consistent.
Well, I look forward to that, and I look forward to learning more from you. And thank you for taking the time today. We've covered so many things that were on my mind and that were important. I could probably talk to you all day. I really appreciate that you spent the time to share your wisdom with me today.
Okay, no problem. It was nice meeting you and talking with you.
Nice meeting you too. Maybe we can do this again sometime.
Okay, take care.
Thanks, Jack. You too. Well, that was an epic conversation with Uncle Jack. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I want to give you some context about why we were talking about my dad and the casino so much. So, before we started recording, I shared with Uncle Jack that my parents met at a casino in the Bahamas and then moved my family to Las Vegas, where I grew up, and that my dad was an abusive, compulsive gambler. This is very relevant to Jack's life's work and the story that he told when he went on the Danny Jones podcast a few months ago. If you haven't listened to that podcast, I highly recommend that you listen to it, probably more than once. This was about a 4-hour conversation where he connected the dots between the technologies that the mob figured out they could use in the casinos to control people and the technologies that we use today in our modern lives, and how that's making everybody sick, and how it's connected to government corruption, corporate corruption, the JFK assassination, Rockefeller medicine, the jabs and COVID, the Federal Reserve, and so many of the things that we're dealing with geopolitically now in 2025. And so when I heard him on that podcast explain the connections that went all the way back to the casinos, where the mob understood that they could use blue light technology to dumb people down and control them, where they understood that they could create an environment that was disconnected from nature by blocking out the windows to lower people's dopamine and basically make them compliant idiots, it felt personal for me. It felt personal for me because I grew up in Las Vegas with my father, who was a victim of that environment that then I had to heal from. But the reasons why I asked him about consciousness and fear and pain are because before I discovered Jack's work, I had to do a lot of deep soul searching to understand how the pain that I had been experiencing could be used as fuel to expand my own consciousness. And I had to do what he describes. I had to embrace the suck. I had to find the lessons in the pain. And I had to expand my consciousness, my self-awareness, and my awareness of my environment. And I've come to understand that your health is a reflection of your consciousness, and your consciousness is a reflection of your health. So he is uniquely positioned to answer those questions. And boy, did he not disappoint, because I didn't have to say much. But he really connected the dots in a brand new way for me about how consciousness, pain, fear, and health and light are all connected. So please listen to it multiple times until it really sinks in. If you have any questions about my healing journey or my perspective on these topics, feel free to reach out to me. You can reach me on Instagram through the DMs at Cheryl_Utah, or you can email me at Cheryl@japa.health. And understand, I've been teaching how to access higher states of consciousness for about 15 years. And that's what we do at Japa Health, which is coming soon. That's why I've started this podcast, Big Dharma, and we're going to continue to have more interesting conversations about all of these topics. Hopefully, Jack will be able to come back on and go deeper into some of these things. I already have more questions for him, and I think he is uniquely positioned to explain them in a way that nobody else can. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to comment, like, and share it with anybody else that you think would like it too. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Until next time, namaste.